Welcome back to the Powered by Football podcast. Now, on last week's episode, one thing I forgot to mention is that there is no football on this weekend. There was no games played. So instead, I've decided to sort of do some admin stuff, some little things that need sorting out whilst there's no football being played. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. The first thing that I kind of want to go through is that we are doing our first... I say our first, it's the first season I've been doing the podcast, but whatever. We are doing the first Powered by Football Awards. So, in the show notes of this episode, there will be a Google form featuring 13 awards for you to vote on, and I'm going to quickly go through those awards now. So we have the Underrated Player of the Season for reserves, and the Underrated Player of the Season for the Premier League. I feel like they're both pretty self-explanatory. We then have the SAT player who has developed the most, the Skills Acquisition Program player. And then we have the Most Passionate award for both reserve and Premier. Just someone who plays with their heart on their sleeve and just goes all out with it. Then we have the Moment of the Season for reserve grade and the Premier League. This can be anything really, a goal, a performance, something funny that happened. It doesn't matter. It's just a sort of way to say, hey, here's a cool moment in the 2024 season. And then moving on, we have the Best Interviewee, more podcast-focused questions. So who do you think had the best interview on the Powered by Football podcast? Your favourite Powered by Football podcast, hosted by Jackson Taylor. Let us know who you think that deserves to be. And then we have the Game of the Season for both reserves and the Premier League. Just put in the score and the teams, and then I'll sort out the rest. We have the coach/volunteer/referee of the season. I want to be able to recognise more people outside of the players, so I thought this would be a fun way to get some of those people involved. The final awards we have are the hardest player to play against for both the reserve grade and Premier League. So fill out the name of whoever you think is applicable for that, and then we will sort it out and we will speak to the award winners at the end of the season. One other thing I should note too is that on the form, if you don't have an answer for a question because you don't play in one of the competitions mentioned, then obviously just write not applicable. But if you want to give an answer based on what you've seen on the bench or as a coach or any of that, feel free to. But yeah, I just thought I'd put that in too. You'll also see that at the bottom of the form, there is a thing that says, is there anything else you wish to add? That's kind of just a podcast administration thing. If you want to complain about the podcast, if you want to spread your love for the podcast, if you want to say that you thought Matt was a better host than me, you can say all of that or none of that, preferably none of that, except for the love. I'll take that. Yeah, that's just there for admin's sake. Please fill in the award winners if you feel like you want your vote to matter. Thanks to Jake Vidikovic, a mate of mine who suggested this awards idea to me. Thanks for the idea, mate. It's going to be a fun one, and I can't wait to speak to the award winners. And then moving on to the next idea that I've had is I want the last episode of the Matchday Roundup for this season at least to sort of feature an homage to the roots of this season and the roots of this podcast in general. So you may remember that at the start of the early Matchday Roundups, I would do a whole "This is the Matchday Roundup" thing at the start of every episode. It was the same audio clip that I played over and over, which I initially thought was a creative thing. And I think everyone kind of got a bit tired of it by the time I took it out. But I thought, you know what? Let's pay tribute to it. And for the last episode of this season, I'm going to get as many people as I can to say it themselves. And I'm going to put it in the start as a sort of compilation before we get into the episode itself. So if you want your voice to be on the podcast, then just, if you see me at soccer, if you want to be on and you're not at soccer, chuck me a message on the Powered by Football Pod on Instagram or Powered by Pod on Twitter. Join the Facebook group, Powered by Football Podcast, any of that, and I can sort it out. But yeah, let me know if you're in person. We can record it together. And yeah, that's a fun idea. That's one of the plans to make the final episode a bit more grand. I also plan on, including the awards in the last episode, and I also plan on looking at the predictions made throughout the season for the last episode, as well as obviously the Matchday Roundup as well. That's obviously par for the course. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is sort of the future of this podcast, because the thing that kind of happens with sports podcasts is that they only run as long as their season. So I thought I'd kind of talk about where I see this podcast, and its trajectory over the coming weeks, because the Powership football season here in New South Wales finishes on the 6th of July, which is less than a month away. So I kind of wanted to let you all know where the podcast is sitting and stuff like that. The plan is to keep on doing the Matchday Roundups until the season ends. And then after that, and then we have some interviews that I've been working on in the space after that. And that'll be really fun to sort of hear more personal voices of the podcast and stuff like that. And then we have the national competition, which will be very fun up in Brisbane. I am hoping to be able to get those episodes out daily. It is the Matchday Roundup after all. So I would like to get them out. We have about a week-long competition to be able to get them out for you the day of or the day after each game is played. I can't promise that because I don't know how it's all going to work at Nationals. This will be my first time manning a podcast and playing at the same time, obviously. So if that doesn't come to fruition, please don't burn my house down. Whatever has to happen, I will do my best to get these episodes out as quick as I can. So that'll be on in the end of August. So there may be a little break in there depending on how many interviews we get done. But I cannot be certain. Yeah, that's about all I had to say. Really, vote for those awards. Put your voice in the podcast. Yeah, that's really about it. I've covered everything. Thank you guys so much for listening to this, humble little podcast of mine. I know we're not at the end of the season just yet, but I do want to say this has been really fun. And yeah, all right. Enjoy. You can get involved in the Powership football here in New South Wales as an athlete, coach, referee, or volunteer by visiting the NSW PFA website linked below. Our season takes place in Glenwood at the Valentine Sports Park from the 24th of February 2024 to the 6th of July 2024 every Saturday. Contact info@nswpfa.org.au for more information. Just a quick note that the views of this podcast are mine and mine alone. The opinions and thoughts expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the NSW PFA. If you want to get in touch with the podcast, you can follow us at Powered by Football Pod on Instagram, join our Facebook group, Powered by Football Podcast, or follow our Twitter account, Powered by Pod. Thanks for listening.